My name is Sloane Hart, 32 years old. I didn't become my parents' bank all at once. It happened in deposits, the way a shoreline erodes, quietly, then obviously. When Dad got laid off, Mom called with a breaking voice and a list: mortgage, groceries, medicine, just until we get back on our feet. I make my money one invoice at a time, so $600 a week for a year wasn't easy. I sent it anyway. That's what family does, I told myself, and pressed transfer with a stomach that never quite unclenched. Every time the money landed, Mom's voice floated over it with a new suggestion arranged like a compliment. Laura made such smart choices, you know. My sister's smart choice was marrying Dan and his money. Somehow that became Laura knows finance. I didn't argue. In our house, Laura has always been the polished portrait on the wall, and I've been the hook behind it, holding everything up. 3 days before everything cracked, I invited my parents over for a small cookout. Steaks, a couple drinks, my treat. "We're not feeling well," Mom said with a sigh that asked for pity and permission. "Don't come by. We don't want you to catch anything, but if you could help us with some medicine, things are a little tight." I sent $200 without blinking. She replied with 3 hearts and a promise to pay me back soon. A promise I've learned is just another way to say never. The next afternoon, my neighbor Mr. Jenkins, retired, kind, the unofficial mayor of our block, called to tell me he'd fed my parents fish while they were gone. "Gone where?" I asked, the question already a lit match. "Vacation," he said cheerfully. "They left 6 days ago with Laura and her husband. Looked like a nice family trip." I don't remember how I ended the call. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the wall breathe until the late light turned it the color of forgiveness I didn't feel. I didn't drive over that second. If I had, I might have said something. Even the truth couldn't take back. I lay awake instead and counted the weeks, 52 of them, of $600, counted the times I skipped dinner out, the shoes I didn't buy, the emergencies that weren't mine. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I remembered Evan's ex-girlfriend texting me months ago, an unasked-for gem. "You'll always cave. That's what they like about you." I'd deleted it. The words were still here. By evening, I had cooled enough to be clear. Their car sat in the driveway with road dust still on it. The porch light was on, like a stage cue. Mom opened the door with a smile so bright you'd think we'd rehearsed this reunion. "Sloane, what a nice surprise. We were just sitting down to dinner." "How was the trip?" I asked. Her smile flickered, then fought for its life. "What trip?" "The one you took with Laura and Dan. The one you lied about while asking me for money for medicine." I was steady, almost calm. It scared me, how calm. She folded her arms, a gesture that always meant the conversation was over because she said so. "We don't have to tell you everything we do." Dad stepped into the hall with a heavy sigh, arms crossed for punctuation. "Watch your tone." I laughed then, a sharp sound. "I sent you $600 a week for a year. You can watch my tone while I do the math. 3 days ago, you were on a beach telling me not to stop by because you were sick, and you asked me for money. I took out my phone, opened my banking app, and with my thumb turned off the automatic transfer I had turned on the night I chose duty over sense. There, that's done. That's..." Mom's face fell. Dad's jaw tightened. For the first time, they looked surprised. Not sorry, surprised. "Don't be like this," Mom started. "You know things are hard for us." Mom, shh. "They weren't hard enough to keep you from posting sunsets," I said. "They weren't hard enough to keep Laura from tagging a champagne brunch." Dad's mouth curled. "You're just jealous we didn't invite you." That line, delivered like a diagnosis, landed where guilt had lived. It didn't stick. "Jealous?" I repeated. "No. I'm done being convenient." Behind them I could hear plates. Dan's laugh echoes in rooms, even when he isn't in them. I imagined him there earlier, telling a story about business like he invented the word. I stepped back. "I'm leaving now," I said. "Eat your dinner." I drove with the windows down so I wouldn't hear their calls. When I walked in, Evan was on the couch, eyes searching my face like a first responder. He is not a fixer. He is a mirror. "Tell me," he said. And I did, from Mr. Jenkins to the porch light to the transfer. He didn't say "I told you so," though he could have. He didn't say "be the bigger person," though that's the script I was raised on. He said, proud of you, like a blanket. They'll come here, I said eventually. They'll send Laura first. He looked past me to the door, jaw working in that quiet way he has when he's choosing not to say what he'd like to do. Then this is where we practice no. We didn't have to wait long. The next morning, my phone stacked itself with missed calls, voicemails layered with Sloan, honey, and this is your father, and pick up. At noon, someone pounded on the door like a warrant. Evan glanced at me. I shook my head. I hadn't invited anyone. Sloan, Laura's voice caroled through the wood. Open up. I opened it just enough to stand in the frame. Laura looked like she always does. Expensive and certain. Mom and Dad hovered behind her, a chorus. Are you seriously punishing them over a vacation? Laura asked, pushing her sunglasses up onto glossy hair. I'm ending a pattern, I said. Big difference. You act like they forced you to send money, she scoffed. You chose it. I chose family, I said. They chose to lie. Mom scrunched her mouth like she had bitten the wrong thing. That's not fair. We struggled. On the beach, I said, with medicine money in your wallet. That closed Mom's mouth. Laura rolled her eyes. It's not a big deal. Turn the payments back on. Let's be done with this tantrum. No, I said. If you think it's small, you cover it. Dad puffed up. We don't want your money. Good, I said. You're not getting it. Evan stepped up beside me, not in front of me. His voice was soft steel. We're done here. If you need to communicate, do it by text. If you come back uninvited, we'll call the police. He held his phone up, recording now. For everyone's memory. Laura's mouth fell open, like no one had ever shown her a boundary before. She turned to our parents for backup they didn't have. Their silence spelled it. They had lost their audience. We closed the door on three shapes, still learning what no sounds like. We didn't get an afternoon. Evening barely settled before my phone buzzed with a string of unknown messages. One stood out, the tone too familiar to be random. All this drama just to prove you're not the weak link. They'll still get what they want. Evan's ex. Of course. I stared at the words until they shrank to what they were. Bait. I put my phone face down. They'll try again, Evan said. Not a warning, just weather. I nodded. In the quiet, I could finally hear my own breath without counting dollars against it. That night, I slept without clenching my jaw. In the morning, I made coffee that tasted like something other than obligation. 2 hours later, the door shook under another knock, harder, angrier. Laura stood there again, this time with Dan behind her, big as a hallway. I felt the day tilt. You think this is funny? He growled, stabbing a finger toward my chest. Letting your little boyfriend mouth off? Evan stepped forward before the word little finished. Step back, he said evenly. Dan took another step. Evan's right hand moved once, clean. Dan's jaw met the lesson on boundaries that our family had never offered. He stumbled, blinking, then lunged. Evan's second punch said, "This is my home." Dan hit the floor with the surprise of a man who has always won by being bigger. You came here looking for a fight, I said into the buzzing air. You found one. Now leave. Laura shrieked something about war. Evan lifted his phone again. The recording red dot, a tiny, perfect witness. Go, he said, or we press charges. They went. The silence after felt like air conditioning on the hottest day of July. Evan looked at me, then at his knuckles, then back at me. We still okay? We're better, I said, and meant it. There was a bruise blooming under my anger, but beneath it something else was setting. Resolve, I think. For the first time in my life, my no didn't come with a payment plan. The morning after Evan dropped Dan in our doorway, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. But people like Laura don't vanish when the script doesn't go their way. They rewrite. By noon, my phone had already stacked with voicemails. My mother's voice in one was syrupy with indignation. Sloan, honey, I can't believe what happened yesterday. That boyfriend of yours assaulted your sister's husband. Who does he think he is? Another one, Dad this time, came across with blunt edges. You need to control your man. He laid hands on Laura's husband in your home. That's assault. Fix it. I played them on speaker while Evan sipped coffee, calm as if he were listening to the weather. He raised his eyebrows, but didn't flinch. They want me to rein you in, I said. He snorted. You can barely rein me in at the gym, let alone when someone's threatening you in your own house. I smiled despite myself. The guilt I'd been raised on, about tone, about respect, about owing my parents everything, didn't land the way it used to. Their words slid off like water on wax. Around 3 in the afternoon, another knock came. Less pounding, more deliberate. I half expected the police with some half-baked complaint. But when I opened the door, Laura stood there again. Not alone. Dan was beside her, his jaw already purpling from Evan's fist, sunglasses failing to hide the swelling. He looked less furious than calculated, his eyes carrying a weight that said I came here for round 2. "You think this is over?" Laura snapped, arms folded, chin high. "It should have been over the moment you lied to me about a beach trip while cashing my transfers," I said evenly. Dan stepped forward, his voice low. "You let your man touch me again, and you'll regret it." Before Evan could move, I raised my hand. "Stop. You already threatened me in my own doorway yesterday. The only regret you're going to have is when a judge sees the footage." I pointed to the camera mounted above the door, its tiny red light glowing. Evan's voice was steady. "We recorded everything. You came here, threatened Sloan, lunged at me. You want to push this? Try." Dan froze. Not because he believed us, but because for the first time he realized he couldn't control the story. Laura yanked his arm. "Come on." They stormed off, Laura shrieking about wars and betrayals, Dan silent but seething. I shut the door before their footsteps even hit the sidewalk. Inside, Evan exhaled. "They'll pivot, they always do." He was right. That evening, my mother called again, tears laced into her voice, like she was auditioning for sympathy. "You're being manipulated, Sloan. Family doesn't turn on family over something so small. We just wanted one nice trip without you making it about money. And now look, you've got your boyfriend attacking people, making us look like fools." I almost laughed. "Mom, you made yourselves look like fools when you lied to me, borrowed medicine money, and toasted on a beach with Laura." Evan didn't start this fight. He finished it because Dan thought he could intimidate me. Her breath hitched, the way it does when she knows she's losing ground. "We raised you better than this." "No," I said quietly. "You raised me to bankroll your comfort while you praised Laura for marrying a wallet. That's what ends today." The silence that followed was thick with disbelief, like she couldn't imagine her favorite daughter's shadow no longer holding me in place. She hung up first. Evan watched me pace the living room. "You're shaking," he said gently. "Not from fear," I admitted. "From relief. But relief has a short shelf life in my family." 3 nights later, Mr. Jenkins waved me down as I was pulling into the driveway. His eyes sparkled with the kind of gossip that carries both sadness and satisfaction. "You missed a show," he said. I frowned. "What show?" "Your sister. She came back to your folks' house last night, slammed the car door so hard I thought the windows would crack. She was yelling before she even hit the porch, loud enough the whole street caught it." My chest tightened. "What was it about?" He leaned in, lowering his voice, even though there was no one else around. "She told them flat out, if they hadn't bled you dry, you wouldn't have snapped. Said it was their greed, not yours, that ruined everything." "And then?" He chuckled. "They told her it was her turn now. Since you cut them off, she should step up. That's when she lost it. Called them leeches. Told them they should have saved instead of blowing it on vacations." I blinked. Jenkins's grin widened. "Best part?" She told them, "Why don't you call Sloan and apologize so she'll turn the payments back on?" Your dad puffed up and said they didn't want your money. Your mom started crying, going on about family. But your sister? She called them out, word for word. "You don't care about family. You care about who you can squeeze." Then she stormed out. I stood there stunned. For years, I was the backup plan. Laura was the golden child, and in 1 week, they'd managed to lose us both. When I went inside, Evan raised an eyebrow at my expression. "They finally ran out of banks," I said softly. He pulled me into his chest. "So what happens now?" I didn't have the answer then. But a week later, my phone lit up with a message from Dad that chilled me more than anger ever could. "Sloan, call me back. It's important. It's about Laura." I stared at the text from Dad for a long minute, my thumb hovering over the screen. His messages had always been about money, never about Laura. That alone told me something was different. Against my better judgment, I called. He answered on the first ring. "Sloan," he said, his voice low, almost tired. "I don't want to fight, but we need to talk. It's your sister." My chest tightened. "What about her?" He hesitated like he was choosing which truth to admit. "Dan filed for divorce. Kicked her out of the house. She's back here now. She doesn't have anywhere else to go." For a second, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the irony. Laura, the golden child who once told me to just turn the payments back on, like flipping a light switch, was now broke, standing in the same kitchen where they'd lied to me about being sick. You mean the woman who sneered at me while you pocketed my money is suddenly homeless? I asked. Dad sighed. Please don't make this harder. She's hurting. She's hurting? I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. Do you know how many nights I lay awake, wondering how I was going to stretch my own paycheck because you two convinced me you were one step from losing everything? Do you know how many times Laura looked at me like I was a fool for helping you? He stayed quiet. I could hear clinking in the background, maybe dishes, maybe Laura unpacking bags she never thought she'd carry again. She wants to talk to you, he said finally. I let out a cold laugh. Not my problem, and I hung up. When I told Evan, he just nodded. They'll try to pull you back in through her, he said. Don't let them. But my mind wouldn't settle. I thought about Laura's perfectly manicured nails clutching designer handbags, her mocking tone when she said, they didn't force you to send money. And now she was right back where she started, stripped of all the image she built on Dan's dime. 2 days later, I got proof of just how deep the manipulation had gone. I sat at the table scrolling through old bank statements, something I hadn't done in months because the memories were too raw. But a pattern started to jump out at me. Dates when Mom called claiming the mortgage was late lined up perfectly with dates Laura posted vacation photos, beaches, spas, champagne brunches. Weeks when Dad asked me for medicine money were the same weeks Laura flaunted new jewelry on social media. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My mother hadn't just been covering for Laura. She had been coordinating it, feeding me sob stories to funnel money toward Laura's image. When I told Evan, he clenched his jaw, furious on my behalf. They weren't just using you, he said. They were financing her life with your sacrifices. I couldn't decide which stung worse, the betrayal itself or how obvious it seemed now. That night, Laura called me directly. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear what rock bottom sounded like in her voice. When I picked up, her tone was stripped of its usual confidence. Sloan, she whispered, I need your help. Help? I asked. Or money? I don't have anywhere else to go, she said, her voice trembling. Dan's gone. He said he's done carrying me. Mom and Dad, they can't handle me either. Her breath hitched. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes. For years, I'd been the net everyone fell into. But nets fray when they're pulled too tight. I'm sorry, I said slowly, but I'm not your solution. Not anymore. She went quiet. And then, for the first time in my life, my sister, Laura, the untouchable, the golden child, began to cry. I didn't hang up this time. I listened, not with sympathy, but with clarity. She was unraveling, and for once, I wasn't the one holding the thread. Laura's sobs on the other end of the line rattled me more than I wanted to admit. For 32 years, she'd been untouchable, shielded by our parents' endless excuses, their pedestal, her polished smile. Now she sounded small, like the little girl I vaguely remembered, the one who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares before she learned she could get away with anything. I'm not asking for money, she choked finally. I don't know where to go. Dan doesn't want me. Mom keeps snapping at me. Dad won't even look at me. She broke off. I feel disposable. The irony nearly made me laugh, but instead I exhaled and kept my voice level. Welcome to my side of the family dynamic. She sniffled. I know. I was awful to you. I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. Mom always said you'd manage, that you'd pick up the slack, that it was your job to help. Her words wavered, then dropped. I believed her. I swallowed hard. I'd dreamed of Laura saying these things, but I'd also known if that day ever came, it would be when she had no other choice. And here it was, apology by necessity. I'm not your safety net anymore, I said softly. But I can point you toward one you weave yourself. There's a cafe downtown hiring. A department store, too. You've got skills. You just never had to use them. She was quiet for a long beat. You'd help me find a job? Help, yes. Fund, no. The line went silent. Then she whispered, That's fair. When I hung up, Evan was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, studying me. You okay? Not really, I admitted. But I didn't cave. That's something. He nodded. Boundaries hurt at first, like breaking in new shoes. The next week unfolded like a strange new play. Laura texted me actual questions, what to wear to an interview, how to write a resume. I answered in bullet points, curt but not cruel. Dad called twice, his voice hushed, like he was ashamed to be overheard. He didn't ask for money. He just asked how I was sleeping. It was the first time in years he'd asked me anything that wasn't about them. Mom, though, was another story. She rang one evening, her tone sharp. "You're poisoning your sister against us. She's not herself. She snapped at me in front of the neighbors. Do you know how humiliating that is?" I pinched the bridge of my nose. "She's finding her voice, Mom. That's not poisoning. That's growth." "You always think you're better than us," she spat. "No," I said quietly. "I just finally stopped thinking I was worse." And I ended the call. 2 days later, Evan's phone buzzed with a name that made my stomach drop. His ex-girlfriend. She'd posted some smug comment on social media. "Funny how some people think cutting off family makes them strong. Newsflash, you'll still be alone." Evan screenshotted it, then blocked her without hesitation. He slid his phone across the table to me. "She doesn't get to write your ending. You do." For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile tug at my lips. By the end of the month, Laura was working part-time at the cafe. She texted me a photo of her apron, her hair tied back, no designer sunglasses in sight. The caption read, "Day 1, wish me luck." I stared at the picture for a long time, not out of pity, but out of awe. For once, she was living a life not purchased by someone else's sacrifice. That weekend, my parents invited me to dinner. "Just to talk," Dad said, his voice almost pleading. Evan squeezed my hand as I debated. "Go," he said, "but don't go alone. Bring your terms with you." So I did. I sat at their table, the same one I'd once eaten Sunday roasts at, and laid it out clear. No more weekly support, no surprise visits, no guilt calls, no triangulation through Laura. They balked, of course. Mom's eyes welled up. Dad muttered about respect. But when I stood to leave, they broke. Mom wiped her face and nodded stiffly. "Fine," she said. "Your rules." Walking out into the night air, I felt lighter. Not because they agreed, but because for the first time in my life, I hadn't walked back my own boundary. Later, Evan and I sat on our tiny balcony, city lights flickering like stars we could almost touch. My phone buzzed twice on the table. I didn't flip it over. "You're not curious?" Evan teased. I shook my head, leaning against him. I already know who it is, and I already know the answer. For the first time, the quiet around me didn't feel like calculation or punishment. It felt like peace. And this time, it was mine. The weeks that followed felt surreal. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't vibrating with guilt trips disguised as check-ins. The silence from my parents' end wasn't the suffocating kind I'd grown up fearing. It was a silence that meant they'd run out of leverage. Laura, on the other hand, surprised me. She texted little updates. "Got through my first week without messing up an order." Or, "Customer left me a tip just for being nice." They were small things, but they carried the weight of someone finally learning to stand without the crutches our parents had pressed under her arms all her life. One night she called while I was making dinner. "I'm not good at this," she admitted, her voice stripped bare. "Working, paying my own way. But it feels better than I thought it would. Like I can finally breathe without waiting for someone to hand me air." I swallowed hard, glancing at Evan across the kitchen. He mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm glad," I told her. "That's the point. To learn it was always in you." She went quiet before saying, "Thank you for not just hanging up on me when you could have." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, Mom couldn't resist her patterns. She called again, voice coated in sugar, asking if I'd reconsider helping them through this rough patch. I repeated my rules calmly, like reciting terms of a lease. No money, no manipulation, no exceptions. The sharp inhale on her end told me she hated it, but she didn't argue, not this time. Dad called separately a week later, his words slow, deliberate. "I wish I'd seen it sooner," he said. "How we leaned on you, how unfair it was." There was a pause, and then softer. "I'm sorry, Sloan." The apology wasn't perfect, it came years too late. But it was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from him, and it landed heavier than I expected. As for Evan, he became more than just my anchor. He became my mirror. When my old fears tried to creep back, he held them up to me until I recognized they weren't mine anymore. His ex tried one last jab online, something about me breaking a family apart. But Evan shut it down with a public post. "Protecting the person you love isn't breaking a family. It's breaking a cycle." He tagged me in it. I'd never felt more seen. One Saturday evening, my parents invited us again for dinner. This time, I didn't flinch. Evan and I went, hand in hand. The house looked the same, spotless surfaces, flowers on the table, but something in the air had shifted. There was no performance of superiority, no golden pedestal for Laura, just people sitting down to a meal with an uncomfortable awareness of their own mistakes. Laura was there too, hair tied back from a long shift, no designer labels, just a tired smile. She looked more real than I'd ever seen her. She met my eyes across the table, and in that glance, I saw both apology and resolve. We didn't hug when we left. We didn't make grand declarations. But for once, it didn't feel like I was walking away as the lesser child. It felt like I was walking away as myself. That night, Evan and I sat on our balcony again. The city hummed below us, my phone face down on the table. He wrapped his arm around me. "You notice how quiet it is?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Does it scare you?" I leaned my head on his shoulder. "No, not anymore. For the first time, it feels like the right kind of quiet. The kind that isn't punishment. The kind you build for yourself, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. The kind that feels like peace. And this time, I knew I'd never give it up.